everybody, and welcome to Lesson 2.5, Soil Formation and Dynamics. The content in this video is aligned to the third edition of Environmental Science for AP and covers information from College Board Units 2.7, 4.2, and 4.3. One of the major places where systems interact is the formation of soil. Everything that we've discussed so far, biogeochemical cycles, the atmosphere, geology, and water resources and systems, all interact to form and maintain the kind of soil that we have available to us. This leads us to the content objectives of understanding that ecosystems have structure and diversity that change over time, Earth systems interact, resulting in a state of balance over time, and local and regional human activities can have impacts at the global level. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the characteristics and formation of soil, describe ecological succession, describe the effect of ecological succession on ecosystems, describe similarities and differences between properties of different soil types, identify the ways in which human populations impact soil, health, and formation. This leads us to being able to answer our guiding question: how can we maintain our soil resources? The formation of soil is an extensive process that takes place over hundreds to thousands of years. There are 5 major components that determine the type and quality of soil that is found in a particular location. The first is parent material, which is the kind of rock that is going through the weathering process. Different types of rock have different compositions, which will lead to the formation of different soils. Next is climate. The amount of rainfall and temperature play a large role in the kinds of weathering that will occur, such as ice wedging in areas with consistent freeze and thaw cycles. Topography is next, and works very closely with the first 2. The elevation, openness, and contours of the land play a large role in the way that weathering and erosion occurs through water and wind contact. Organisms play a key role in determining the organic composition of soil through decomposition and other processes such as nitrogen fixation. They also contribute to soil aeration. Lastly, there's time. Soil takes a considerable amount of time to fully form. In fact, it takes about 500 years to form 1 inch of topsoil. All of the conditions mentioned before play a key role in the way that weathering occurs. There are 2 basic categories of weathering: physical or mechanical, and chemical. There is a third process, biological weathering, that can be associated with either mechanical or chemical, depending upon the process occurring. Mechanical weathering occurs from contact with things such as wind or flowing water. Ice wedging is a particular form of mechanical weathering in which water enters cracks in a rock, freezes and expands, thaws, and repeats the process until the rock is broken apart. Note that mechanical weathering only changes the physical shape of the rock. Chemical weathering, however, occurs when the chemical structure of the rock is changed through processes such as contact with acids or oxidizing agents. Water, it can be seen, can work as either a mechanical or a chemical weathering agent, depending upon its impact on the rock itself. Lastly, there's biological weathering, which is weathering caused by a living organism. This can be chemical, such as when mosses and lichens release chemicals that break down bare rock, or biological, such as when the tree roots break apart a rock. The key thing to remember is that if it's done by a living thing, we would classify it as biological weathering. Now that we've discussed weathering and the basic conditions needed to form soil, let's talk about the actual process as they work together to form functional soil. This process is called succession. There are 2 types: primary and secondary. Primary succession occurs when the starting material is bare rock. In this process, pioneer species like moss and lichen take over the bare rock. Through multiple processes of biological weathering, mechanically breaking up the rock with their roots, and chemically breaking it down using a variety of chemical compounds, the bare rock begins to break down. As the lichen and moss die, they add organic material to the newly weathered rock, allowing for new organisms to grow. The process continues as newer plants, like annuals, begin to colonize the area. These continue to break down the rock and add organic material. Annuals and lichen give way to grasses and perennials. Further development leads to intermediate species like shrubs and shade-intolerant trees. Finally, mature and healthy soil supports a climax community made up of largely shade-tolerant trees. Secondary succession occurs when the climax community is removed through something such as a fire or clear cutting. While the plants and grasses have been removed, there is still viable soil remaining in the area. Secondary succession begins with annual plants recolonizing the area as pioneer species. Annuals give way to grasses and perennial plants, and these give way to shrubs and shade-intolerant trees as intermediate species. Finally, the climax community reestablishes itself. This process, unlike primary succession, occurs when there is already functional soil in place. Now that we know how soil is formed, let's take a closer look at its structure. Generally, soil is made up of 4 basic components: mineral matter, organic matter, air, and water. The vast majority of soil is made up of particles that comprise the mineral matter. The type and abundance of these particles are determined by the parent material of the rock. The scale above shows the 3 major particles compared to a piece of gravel. In order of size, we have sand, silt, and clay. Larger particles, like sand, allow for more open spaces between the particles, meaning that water infiltrates through them and drains out quickly. Smaller particles, like clay, pack more tightly, making infiltration and drainage more difficult. The majority of soils have a combination of these soil particles. Once we know the types of soil particles and the combination of them, we can determine the type of soil that we have based on that composition. To do that, we use what is called the soil texture triangle. The soil triangle overlays the various percentages of soil particles, sand, silt, and clay, and provides a visual method for determining the type of soil one has. In order to use the soil texture triangle, you must know the relative percentages of the particles in the sample. Let's try an example. What kind of soil is made up of 20% clay, 70% sand, and 10% silt? To identify the soil type, we can look at any of the 3 particles to begin. Let's look at sand first. We find the 70% and follow the line upward in a left slant diagonal from the sand line. Then we find the 20% on clay and follow that line horizontally. Mark the place where the sand and clay lines overlap. Then find the 10% silt and follow that on a downward in a left slant diagonal. The 3 lines intersect in the area that is sandy loam. Make note that loam is a most abundant and functional soil for agriculture. The particles found in soil play a larger role than just forming the basic structure of soil. The particles, particularly clay, function as part of what is known as cation exchange capacity. This property of soil allows the storage of positively charged ions, known as cations. These cations are often magnesium and calcium, minerals that nutrients in the plant cannot be produced themselves. In cation exchange, plant roots exchange positively charged hydrogen ions for other cations. Soils that have a higher concentration of negatively charged particles have a higher cation exchange capacity, and therefore often healthier plants. Now that we've looked at the basic components of soil, let's put it all together to form what we call a soil profile. The soil profile includes distinct layers that have specific characteristics. Each layer in a soil profile is called a horizon. Let's look at them from the surface downward. The first layer is the O horizon, which is the surface and is made up of the majority of the organic material like leaf litter and partially decayed living things. This mixture is called humus. Below that is the A horizon, also known as the topsoil, which is a mixture of minerals and humus. The majority of plant roots remain in the A horizon. In some areas, there will be an E horizon, also known as the zone of eluviation. The E horizon is primarily silt and most often found in coastal areas. Please remember, the E horizon will not occur everywhere. However, the B horizon, which comes next, will always be there. The B horizon, known as the subsoil or zone of leaching, often has a distinct yellow-orange color because of the deposition of iron and clay. Then there is the C horizon, which is partially weathered parent material. This is where you'll find larger particles like gravel as they are going through the weathering process. Lastly is the R or D horizon. This is bedrock or the unweathered parent material. On the right, you'll see a fully formed soil profile. See if you can identify each of the layers based on what you see. Now that we have an understanding of the types of soil, let's discuss the ways in which humans impact the health and structure. One way in which we impact the process is through erosion. Keep in mind that erosion and weathering are not the same thing. Erosion is the movement of soil particles or sediment through running water or wind. One of the major causes of erosion is the loss of ground cover. When soil no longer has plant roots to anchor it, flowing water or wind can easily lift up the soil particles and carry them away. And it is the topsoil, the most nutrient-rich, where it is mixed with the organic material, that is lost. Here you see 4 examples of erosion: splash, sheet, rill, and gully. The important ones to know are sheet and gully. Sheet erosion occurs when large areas of soil are lost all at once. This can occur when there are landslides. Gully erosion occurs when the ground is cut into by a large amount of water moving very quickly. Waterlogging is another way that humans degrade soil. Normally, soil should have open spaces between the particles. These open spaces are taken up by a combination of water droplets and air. The roots extend into these places, where they engage in cation exchange and other essential processes like nitrogen fixation. However, when those spaces are filled with water, the plant roots can no longer do essential processes. In essence, the plant drowns. When waterlogged soil raises the water table enough, fields can flood and large-scale sheet erosion can occur. On the opposite end of the spectrum is desertification. This process occurs when the moisture and nutrients are removed from the soil. In instances like these, the most common causes of desertification are overuse and overgrazing. Overuse comes when agriculture continually uses a plot of land, often having to add large amounts of fertilizer to the soil in order to make it functional. This overuse and over-fertilization depletes the soil of nutrients and prevents it from holding onto water. However, desertification can be reversed with careful management. One of the greatest examples of desertification in history is the Dust Bowl in the U.S. Additionally, desertification can contribute to global climate change because it releases carbon dioxide that was trapped within the soil. Lastly, you have soil salinization. This process occurs when an area is irrigated with water that has a relatively high salt content. As the ground is irrigated, some of the water is taken up by the soil. Some of it will evaporate. When the water evaporates, it will often leave behind those salts through crystallization. Excessive artificial irrigation and increasing climate change make salinization a more pressing concern for agricultural productivity. Here are a final few examples of ways in which humans impact soil formation and function. Agriculture and animal husbandry contribute excessively to nutrient loss, soil compaction, and deforestation as land is cleared for use, trampled, and added with artificial fertilizers. Industry and urbanization play key roles in compaction and deforestation as well as we clear land for development. The following slide provides you with an opportunity to see how some of these ideas are connected together. Feel free to pause the video and explore the connections between these topics. Then, use the statements at the beginning to review.